But we had a Scotch fellow named Mr. Groundwater. Now he was straight from Edinburgh, Scotland. And Mr. Groundwater was not only the school librarian, but he also taught us grade 9 Latin. When I was in school, in grade 9, I only had one option choice. You could take French, Latin, and music, which was option A if you were in the music class, or you could take French, Latin, and business administrative studies. Now that was the only choice that I had from grade 9 to the end of grade 12. All of your other courses were compulsory and laid on you, like the French and the English and the math and the science, all laid on. So the only choice that you had in high school was French, Latin, and music, or French, Latin, and business administration. There were no applied level classes in our school. There were no locally developed classes in our school. There was no resource room of any kind in our school. No IEP students of any kind. This was the straight 5-year academic university preparation school, and that's why they called them collegiates. It was Kennedy Collegiate, London Central Collegiate. So if you wanted these other programs, you could not go to those schools. Now having said that, Mr. Groundwater was the librarian, but he also taught us Latin. But he had a very, very thick Scottish accent. And he used to say, "Good morning, boys and girls. Welcome to Skewl. When I was in Skewl back in Edinburgh, Scotland, I remember the wee little laddies and lasses." Now, I don't do it as good as he does, but, he would always talk that way. Now, in Latin, groundwater, when you translate it from English into Latin, is terra aqua. Ground is terra, water is aqua in Latin. So we used to call him the Terra Aqua Man, the groundwater man, the Terra Aqua Man. Now, Mr. Groundwater, his favorite teacher and friend was a man named Mr. Christie, not the guy who made the cookies. But Mr. Christie actually went to school with Mr. Groundwater in Edinburgh, Scotland, and Mr. Christie taught the mathematics. Now, Mr. Christie was very much the same way. He would come in and say, "Mom, oh Mom, I got a hangover this morning. Boys and girls, turn to page 22. So you turn to page 22 and he'd say, "Do the exercise on page 22 and carry on, carry on." And then he used to sit there like this with his head because he would have a hangover, and I think he was an alcoholic, but he never really admitted it. So at lunchtime, or whenever he wanted a break, he would say, "Excuse me, boys and girls, I'll be back in a minute." I think that he went and saw his buddy Mr. Groundwater, and I swear to this day that Mr. Groundwater had some Scotch whiskey in the school, because when he and Christy came back to class, they were glowing and their cheeks were all red and their noses were kind of red and puffy. I could never prove it, but I think that Mr. Groundwater had a bottle of Scotch way back in his own private library collection, but I couldn't prove it. So, because Mr. Groundwater and Mr. Christie always had Skewl, it's sort of like a habit that I kind of picked up on. And of course, what we would do is we would try to get the teacher off track and off topic, just like I am now a little bit. And then we used to say, "Mr. Groundwater, tell us, what was Skewl like when you were a young lad in Scotland?" And then he'd kind of tell us about Skewl, you know what I mean? And we'd say, "Mr. Christie, did you know Mr. Groundwater when you were in Skewl?" And we would kind of like mimic the Scottish accent a little bit. And they'd laugh and we'd laugh and we'd carry on. So who asked the question? Who asked the question? Why do I say Skewl? That's the whole story behind the Skewl business, all right? That's just a laugh, and that's the way the teacher used to do it. Now let's get back here, though, to the